Hello there guys, it's me Unstable Voltage and welcome back to my Crusader Kings 2 for Beginners tutorial series. The thing I want to talk about today is a very important part of Crusader Kings, and it's something that you are going to have to deal with sooner or later, and that is on hiring armies, because there is quite a lot of combat in this game. It's quite similar to EU4 in the way that it is very combat orientated, even though there's probably a little bit more intrigue and cloak and dagger stuff going on in CK2 than there is in EU4. You will still have to fight quite a lot. Now, one thing you are going to notice with Crusader Kings is that for the vast majority of the game, there aren't all that many troops on the actual board. If we zoom in just a little bit to the point where troops show, because you can see there are a couple of armies hanging around here, we can see quite a lot. I mean, there is some places that are in fog of war, like over here in sort of Asia and Europe. But most of, obviously, our own country that we can see a little bit of Saxony, a little bit of the British coast down there. But if I just zoom out a little bit, we can see that there are only two armies just here. Now, these armies belong to a couple of our vassals. They're probably fighting over something. If we actually look at the flag on this army, this is the army of Count Sarno from Flanders, and it matches this flag here. If we actually click on this province, we can see that this is the Duke of Flanders. So this is the Flanders army. And then this army here is the army of Mayor Trutgard from Guines, which will be in here. As you can see, the flag again matches this flag, and it's the county of Guines, assuming that that's how it's pronounced. So those two armies there. And if we click on either of those two counties, and we can see the owners of those two counties, we can actually see here beneath their picture that they're actually at war, and we can see who they're at war with. So he's at war with Flanders, he's at war with Guines, they're at war with each other. If we actually mouse over the little red sword below, we can see that it is a de jure war over Guines. So the attacker is Duke Rodling of Flanders, and the defender is Count Hemeneld of Guines. Or is it supposed to be Guinness? I don't know. Not too sure. Anyway, Duke Rodling of Flanders versus Count Hemeneld of Guines, or Guinness. War score is 18% in favour of the Duke of Flanders. So basically, this guy here is going to war with this guy over this particular province. And if we actually click on the de jure duchies button, that's the reason why. Because these four... Well, actually, all five of these provinces, all five of these counties are part of the Duchy of Flanders. Now, the Duke of Flanders actually owns all three of these counties. He's actually the count of all three of them. Because if we actually look at the county capital, you can see it's actually his flag up in the top left-hand corner. So he is the count of all three of those counties. If we click on Artois, we can see that there's a different flag there, because this guy is just a count. It's a different count. However, if we click on his picture, we can see his liege is the Duke of Flanders. So basically, these three counties are all owned by the Duke of Flanders, and this county is owned by the Count of Artois, but the count is a vassal of the Duke of Flanders. If we click on this guy, we can see that his liege is actually the king. It's us, ourselves. He reports directly to us. So this guy here is actually our vassal. And this duke is going to war because he has a de jure claim on this county. This duke says, I own more than 51% of this duchy. So therefore, this county belongs to the duchy. This particular vassal should belong to this count. And I could go ahead if I wanted to and transfer that to him directly and end that war straight away. So what I could do here is I could go to the Duke, and this is the county of Guines or Guinness, whatever it's supposed to be. I can right click on the Duke, and I've got the option to transfer vassalage. And if I then click on the question mark at the bottom and I find what I want to transfer over, at least it should let me do it. Got to try and find it now. Try and remember the guy's name. What is it? Herman. Okay, so let's go back. So if I just go back into there, transfer vassalage, and because he is my vassal, Oh no, of course. My mistake. Like I said, I am new to this game and I am still learning. No, I am his liege, so he should be reporting direct to me. He's not independent. Not sure why it won't let me transfer it over. Maybe it's because the war is going on. But either way, that's what they're at war over. I'm sort of going off on a tangent here because that's not what I wanted to talk about. But the point is, you will see troops fighting occasionally. But most of the time, there aren't many troops on the battlefield. So, there are 3 different types of troops that you can have, mainly 3 different types of army. Now, the one that you will use most often is called Levies, but I'm going to talk about those last because they're probably the most complicated. So, 3 types of troops you normally have are Levies, your standing armies, which are called Retinues, which you probably won't use until later in the game, and hired troops, which are either Mercenaries or Holy Orders. Now, there is another possibility. Sometimes you get special event troops. Depending on who you're playing as and what's going on, sometimes you will get troops that pop up because a certain event is triggered. Those troops can be all different. Sometimes they will cost you maintenance, sometimes they won't, sometimes they will reinforce, sometimes they won't, and sometimes they'll just despawn automatically once a particular war or event has ended. I'm not going to talk too much about those because it is very dependent on the events that you get and the sort of people that you're playing as. So I think a lot of the tribal rulers tend to get a lot of special event troops, but I'm not going to talk too much about those. What I want to talk about is the ones that you can pretty much guarantee that you'll get in any game. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on the military tab, or the military button up here in the top left hand corner. And you can see that we have 3 tabs across the top here. We have Retinues, Army Levies, and Fleet Levies. We're going to ignore Fleet Levies for now because well, actually, let me very, very quickly go over Fleet Levies. In order to have fleets, you have to have coastal provinces, and those provinces have to have shipyards. If you've got coastal provinces as part of your realm with shipyards, they can and will build ships. Now, raising fleet levies is the same as raising army levies, so I'll talk about that when I get to the army levies. The only thing that fleets are used for in this game is for transportation. Each ship can carry 100 men. And it's literally just used for transport. There's no blockading, there is no naval combat, so they're literally just a transport mechanic. Incidentally, whenever you see the number on a stack of infantry in an army, that is the actual number of men. So unlike something like EU4, where the number represents the amount of regiments within an army. So if you had a stack that had the number 1, it would be 1 regiment of 1,000 men. This is actually 822 men and 1,228 men. And if we actually mouse over them, it does give us a breakdown of the type of composition that army is made up. So you can see the first number is 1,228, which is in red, which means it's not fully reinforced, it's not the full number. 1,228 of 1,362. So that army is short of about 140 men, which it will reinforce. And then if you actually look at the numbers in Parathes to the right, you can see that there are 392 light infantry, 489 heavy infantry, 40 pikemen, which are represented in green, which means the pikemen are fully reinforced. They haven't had any losses. 161 light cavalry and 146 archers. I think the only one missing from that composition is heavy cavalry, which isn't represented there. Again, same here. 320 light infantry, 388 heavy infantry, 24 pikemen, which don't seem to die a lot, 108 light cavalry and 72 archers, which again, they're fully reinforced. So you can tell what the composition of a particular army is. Selecting armies you can only do on your own armies is a little bit of a pain. You have to sort of drag over them with a box. But let's go back into that military tab. So we've got the Retinues, the Army Levies, and the Fleet Levies tab. Below that, we have 3 other tabs that represent Vassals, Mercenaries, and Holy Orders. Well, first of all, let's go through these, the Mercenaries and Holy Orders. Mercenaries and Holy Orders are groups of units that you can hire. Now, they have a very, very high cost. You can sort them by rank, name, cost, total strength, and all of that stuff here. So we can actually see, if we're looking at the Mercenaries and we can sort by cost, we've got this guy. This is one of the cheapest ones that are available. Now, we have the cost. This is how much gold it would cost to instantly hire this particular band of mercenaries. So this band of mercenaries is made up of 600 heavy infantry, 300 pikemen, 300 light cavalry, and 300 archers. So it's a total strength of 1,500 men. It had costed us 150 ducats to hire, and it would have a monthly cost of 10 ducats, 10.8 ducats basically. So mercenaries are very, very useful in a war because they give you a lot of men and you get them all at the same time. Now, they do start with limited morale, so it does take them a little bit of time to get up to full morale so that they're fight worthy, but not very long at all. Now, you do have to be careful with mercenaries because the problem with mercenaries is if you ever run out of money to pay them, then one of two things will happen. They will either disband and leave you without an army, or a very weakened army, or they will turn against you. And the last thing you want to do is end up fighting against your own mercenaries if you're already in a big war that you're losing, which is probably the reason why you hired mercenaries in the first place. So, things that are important to consider when you're hiring mercenaries: how many men do they have, what their unit composition is, how much they're going to cost you, and how much they're going to cost you per month. Now, you can hire more than one band of mercenaries at a time. These ones I can't hire because I don't have enough money to be able to hire them. But as you see, as you go up, some of the mercenary bands do actually have a huge amount of troops. Some of these top bands have 4,500 men. Some of the mercenary bands also come with their own fleets as well. So, the Victual Brothers here, the Victual Brothers, actually come with 6 ships. And as time goes on, the various different bands of mercenaries that are available will change. Another important thing to do if you're thinking about hiring mercenaries, or if you're thinking about assigning military leaders, is go and left click on the portrait of one of the leaders, and you'll actually see things like their martial ability, which is very, very good because when you're leading troops, a higher martial ability is better. But the important thing is to look at this little icon down here, which is basically 2 crossed swords on a shield, and this is their personal combat skills and modifiers. Now, this guy of the Lombard band has a personal combat skill of 1. He's actually got a very, very bad combat modifiers. If we go down to the Swiss band here and click on this guy, now this guy actually has a personal combat skill of 2, but he also has a 21.5% morale defense modifier, a 10% bravery modifier, and he has a 2.15 martial influence, because his martial skill is 23, and 23 is a lot higher than the 15 of this guy here. And if we actually look at those two bands, they have the same number of men in them. They have a very similar composition. You're just losing 300 infantry for an extra 300 pikemen. But this guy is a much, much better leader in battle. He's actually slightly cheaper per month to maintain as well. So the actual cost to hire mercenaries is more based on the total number of troops. The cost to maintain per month is more based on the unit composition. But it is always worth checking with each individual leader just to actually have a look and see if they have any combat modifiers. So this guy has a battlefield terrain master, which means narrow flank. He's mastered the craft of finding the perfect terrain for defensive battles. Narrow flank plus 50%, which basically means if he's in a battle with somebody else, then their flank gets reduced down to a smaller size, which makes it easier to destroy your opponent's flanks, basically. We'll talk about that when we actually get into combat, but it's always good to actually check what the individual combat abilities of the different leaders are. So that's the mercenaries. Holy Orders, we don't have any here at the moment. Holy Orders work pretty much the same way that mercenaries do, with a couple of exceptions. Holy Orders are purchased with piety, not with gold, and Holy Orders can only be recruited to fight in holy wars. So you can only actually use them to fight against heathens, basically. If it's a defensive holy war, I believe they're maintenance free. At least they're supposed to be. Some things do change around and some of the tooltips are a little bit outdated, but I haven't used the Holy Orders myself. But yeah, Holy Orders are basically mercenaries hired with piety that you use in holy wars. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about is the retinues. Now, your retinues are your standing army. Now, at the beginning of the game, you have a very small retinue usage. As you can see, it says my retinue is 1k, but that's probably because I've got such a large nation. If I just mouse over there, current retinue cap usage is 0, because I don't have a retinue. And it tells you how that is calculated. It's 724 from the realm, which is 181 from my holdings, and from technology, there's another 142%. So in total, I could have 1,752 points worth of retinue. Now, retinues are basically recruited from these lists here. These are retinues of various mixed compositions. So we can have a shock retinue, which is 200 heavy infantry and 50 archers. We could have a defense retinue, which is 250 pikemen and 50 archers. We can have a cavalry retinue, which is 50 light cavalry, 50 heavy cavalry and 200 light cavalry, and so on and so forth as we go down the list there. Now, each of these retinues has a different cost, what they are worth in gold. Obviously, the stronger ones are slightly more expensive. Now, the tooltip for retinues, if we actually mouse over it, and what it says here is your retinue is your personal professional standing army ready to do as you order at all times. Unlike army levies, retinues are always on the map and reinforce slowly. Retinues only cost maintenance while reinforcing. The maximum number of retinue and regiments you can field depends on your military organisation, technology and size of all the levies in your realm. Now, before those of you who are familiar with Crusader Kings 2 get on the comments and start telling me that that is wrong, I'm going to point that out. The line that says retinues only cost maintenance while reinforcing is now wrong. That has changed. It used to be that way, but they were considered too overpowered. So when you create a retinue starts with one man, and it will reinforce over time. And you can actually choose how fast your retinues reinforce. You can either have them reinforce at their maximum speed, so 2.5% of the retinue will reinforce per month. Or you can have them to reinforce at half speed, or you can have them not to reinforce at all. Now, while retinues are reinforcing, they cost quite a bit of money. And when they're at max strength, they still cost you a small retainer, but it's nowhere near as much. Now, if you actually look at any of these individual sort of retainers, it tells you what the projected monthly cost is. Now, that's usually the projected monthly cost if they are reinforcing. So if we actually look at the shock revenue here, in fact, actually, that may be the projected monthly cost to have it standing. Yeah, that's the projected monthly cost to have it standing. So this shock retinue would cost me 91 ducats to create, and it would cost me 2.11 ducats per month while it's reinforcing. When it's fully reinforced, it'll probably only cost me 10% of that per month, so it would actually be quite low. Now, even though I have a cap usage of 1,752, that doesn't mean I can have 1,752 men, because different retinues have different costs. So, for example, this skirmish retinue, which is only 250 men, 200 heavy infantry, 50 archers, actually has a retinue cap usage of 650. So we could only get a couple of these, and we'd already be at our retinue cap usage. Now, because retinues start with a single man and reinforce slowly, they're pretty useless in a war. There's no point being in a war that you've just had declared on you and then trying to build a retinue. It won't build up in time. It takes too long and it will cost you too much money. Retinues are what you build up when you have a decent income, when you have a decent amount of money, and if you think there's a chance that you may be attacked by Vikings or by adventurers, or if you've got a particularly hostile neighbour that keeps picking on you, it might be a good idea to have a retinue standing. But most of the time, what you're going to have is your army levies, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. Now, army levies are what you are going to use most of the time, but they are probably the most complicated thing in the game. So, talking about the levies. Levies are basically the peasants that work on the lands in the various different holdings that can all be rallied to battle and fight for you. Now, if we actually click on our ruler's portrait and then click on the realm tree button, and we've seen this before where we actually see this number at the top. If I mouse over this 100% on my character, it says that the total levy of the top liege, which is me because I'm top of the tree, the total levy of the top liege is 3,874 men. Now, that is the potential number of men that I could raise, which includes my own men from my own domain and the men loaned to me by my vassals from their own domain. So if I go down to this guy, for example, the Duke of Brabant, and I mouse over him, now, it's actually saying there that the total levy of top liege is 3,874 because, again, that refers to me because I'm the top liege. Now, the total levy of Duke Anselm of Brabant, this guy I'm mousing over, he has 1,856 men at his disposal. So he has a relative strength of 48% because basically he has 48% of the number of men that I can raise. So if he was to declare war against me, he'd be fighting me with an army that's about half the size of my own, which is pretty significant. And this is why when you're sucking up to various people, you want to suck up to the vassals that have the highest relative strength, and that's the order that they are put on this particular tree. So your stronger vassals in terms of army strength are actually on the left hand side. So we could go ahead to this guy, right click on him, award him an honorary title, and we could make him the master of the hunt, which would make him like us a little bit more. It hasn't updated, it still says 18, but if I minimize and maximize that, that's gone up to 28 now. And you can also see that the current levy of Duke Anselm is 1,666 men, which is a current relative strength of 43%. So he's probably taken some losses to his men. So we can raise 3,874 men. If we go back in and look at the military tab under army levies, and we can see we've got two numbers here. We've got the number which is from domain. Now that's all of the levies that I can raise from my own personal holdings. These 5 holdings that I have here on the outline are the actual any barony that I hold, any county that I hold directly, they are my own personal holdings that are part of my domain. So that in total would give me 2,719 men. And as you can see as I mouse over, it's showing that these 3 numbers represent the amount raised, the amount unraised, and the max total. So I can raise a total of 2,719 men from my own domain. I don't have any of them raised currently, which means all 2,719 are available. Now below that you have the same figures, but these are from the vassals. So from my vassals I don't have any raised, but I could raise a total of 1,535 men. Now what you have to remember, and if we go ahead and just click on one of our own provinces and we actually see, let's look at our Rethel, our county capital here. Now what you actually see beneath the picture of the castle, we can actually click on it and it will bring it up here as well, and we can actually see the number of men that are stationed here. 129 light infantry, 107 light cavalry, 322 heavy infantry, and we can increase the amount of men here by building various upgrades to the buildings. That's something we'll cover in another video as well, but things like this one, castle walls would increase our levy size by 2.5%. If we built the militia training ground, it would give us an additional plus 80 light infantry and an additional plus 10 archers. But you want to look at these two numbers here. You have the garrison size and you have the total levy. Now the garrison size is the number of troops that always stay behind to defend that holding. The garrison never leaves. And the number of people in the garrison represents the defensive strength of a building if it's being sieged by the enemy. So if you have a garrison size of 260, then an enemy army needs at least 261 men, because they need more. They need 261 men in order to be able to siege you out, because they have to have a higher siege value than the garrison. Now, if you haven't raised the levy, like here at the moment the levy isn't raised, the 558 men that are in the levy get added onto the garrison, which would mean anyone attacking would need to have about 820-ish men in order to siege this particular barony. So if any men get killed during a siege, or if you raise any men and they get killed during battle, they do replenish over time, they do reinforce, but they will always reinforce the garrison first. So until the garrison is fully replenished, you won't get any of the available levy. Now, in your own holdings, anything that is part of your own domain, if you raise the levy, you will get the full amount. So my levy here is 558 men. If I was to click on the barony here, and click the raise levy button and just close that down, you can see it's actually raised up my levy and I have 558 men here. I can then go back and can select the army and I can then click on this button that says Disband Unit, which would instantly get rid of that levy. Or I could also go into the military screen and I could press this red button here that says Dismiss all personal levies. So there are a couple of ways you can summon your own levies. If I click this button here that says Raise Personal Levies, that will raise all of my available levies in all of my domains. So as you can see, I've got 5 domains, or 5 baronies, 5 provinces, and I've got 5 armies that have all raised from those individual provinces. Clicking that button again will dismiss those levies. And you can also do that manually for each one. So I could raise all of my personal levies, I could select one unit in particular and say that I want to disband that one particular unit. It does give me a pop-up warning that all levies will stand down. No units will be disbanded because we don't have any retinues. No special event troops will be disbanded. Now, if you disband levies in enemy territory, or, well, any territory that isn't your own, you instantly lose half the men. Half of them die, and only half of them go back into the holding. So, providing you disband them in your own territory, you keep the full amount of men. So that's basically how you raise your own personal levies. You can do it from this screen here. And again, we can re-raise, even though, because we did still have some available. As I've dismissed that one particular levy there, if we go back and look at the military screen, you can see that it now says we have 2,291 of 2,719 raised, which means we have 428 left available, which are the ones in that particular province there. Let's get rid of them all again for a moment. Now, one thing that you can do, like I did here down in my capital, is I went in and clicked on my county capital button and I had raise levy here. Now clicking on that raise levy gives me the 558 troops as expected. Now what you will notice is when I click on the county, there's also a button here that says raise local levies. But what you will notice if I click this button, I have 589 troops, and those troops don't actually have full morale. And the reason for that is because this is actually raising local liege levies. So not only is it raising my own levies from the capital, but it's also raising the levies from the subholdings within it. And these are my vassals. Now, the bishopric probably isn't actually giving me any levy at all. Because basically, most of the time, bishoprics don't like you. If we actually go ahead and look at the bishop here, if we go ahead and look at how much he likes us, look at his court, yeah. So the bishop actually likes the Pope more than he likes us, which means he won't be giving us any levy, and he won't be giving us any tax either. So we get no levy from bishoprics, which is fairly standard. So what we're actually getting is our own men, and we're also getting a small handful from the city. Now, as you can see, you can see the garrison, you can see the levy. Now, his levy is 421 men. He definitely hasn't given me 421 men, but once again, if we go and have a look at this guy, he only has an opinion of us of 23. And that's what comes important when you actually go and look at the military screen here, and you actually look under your army levies. If you actually look down here at your vassals, you can see how many men all of your vassals have and how much they are willing to give you. Now, if we actually sort by opinion here, we can see that the people that have the highest opinion of us will give us the bigger percent of their levy. So this guy's only a mayor. He doesn't have many men to offer us, but he likes us a fairly decent amount, and he will give us, you know, sort of 8 men, which is not a great deal. But if you actually mouse over, it says he could provide us at most with 14 troops. Of this, we are only able to raise 53.9%, which is 8 troops, due to several things. 1, opinion, which is 83%, and 2, laws, which are minus 35%. If we have a quick look at the laws, you'll see what we actually have here is city levies, because he is a city. Normal city levies. The boroughs are expected to provide the majority of their troops for the defence of the realm. Borough, vassal, max levy, minus 35%. That's where that comes from. If I was to put that up to large, then it would go down to -20%, but the borough vassals would get a -10 opinion of me. And if I was to put it up to max, then the maximum levy modifier would be 5%, but again, they would hate us a little bit more. So, as it stands, because of those modifiers, he can only give us, or he's only willing to give us, 8 men out of the 14 he has available. If we were to go in and give him a title, for example, and make him like us a little bit more and change his opinion, and let's just go ahead and refresh the screen, he's now gone up to 93. Now it's gone up to 60.4%, which doesn't change it an awful lot because he has such a small amount of men to give us in the first place. So it probably wasn't the best example. Look at the next guy. This guy is a bishop, and as I've already said, even though he likes us quite a lot, because he actually likes the Pope more, he won't give us anything at all. So we've got this guy. This guy is a count. This guy has 152 men that he's willing to give us. Now, he actually has a total of 261, but at the moment, he's only willing to give us 58.4% because he has a 73% opinion of us, and the laws are -20. Now, you might say, well, why does it say laws -20 when this guy's laws -35? Well, remember, this guy is a mayor. He is part of a city, which means his laws are affected by city levies, and bishoprics are affected by church levies. Now, even though church levies has a clergy vassal max levy of -40%, they still won't give you any at all if they like the Pope more than they like you. But in order to actually get your counts and dukes levies up, they're actually affected by the feudal levies, and feudal levies currently is set to -20. You can actually set it for them to give you less, but then you'll get more opinion with them, which sometimes might work out in your favour. So there's a little bit of min-maxing that has to go on there in order to do that. So if we look at this guy, he's got 261, but he'll only give us 152. If I was to go in and give him an honorary title, for example, he will now give us 184. So you can see now why it's so important when you go onto this screen to try and suck up to these people, because the more these people like you, the more likely they are to give you more of their men. They'll give you a bigger sort of a number of troops. So this guy here, this Duke Anselm of Brabant, if we actually go and look at the military screen and see if we can find him on there, we'll sort by rank. There he is there. He's only giving us 173 men, and he could spare 769. So he has a huge number of men, but he's not willing to give us that many because he doesn't like us all that much. So this is why it's very important to go through this screen very regularly. Make sure you keep the guys on the left as happy as possible. So this guy here, in the Duchy of Brabant, we want to go and suck up to him. And the best way for us to do that is to go in, go and find where our Chancellor currently is, and I'm not sure where I put him because I can't remember, but what I'm going to do, this is the Duchy of Brabant here. I'm going to take my Chancellor, I'm going to improve diplomatic relations, put him here in the Duchy of Brabant, and then he will have a 68.48% each year to improve my diplomatic relations by, I think it's either 20 or 30, and that usually lasts for, I believe it's 4 years. So he will try and improve my relations as time goes on with this guy, which will give me more men available. Now, I appreciate we haven't really got to any warfare in this video, so I'll just finish off by pointing out one other thing about levies that are important. If you raise your own personal levies, you can pretty much keep them raised for as long as you want. There's no negative effects other than raising your own personal levies from your own domain costs you money. There's a maintenance cost per month. If I actually just unpause the game, and it sort of might pop up, we actually click. It's probably such a low amount because I have a small amount of levies, but at the end of the month it'll probably tick over. Let's just let that happen. No playing on the slow speed. Yeah, it's too small to register at this point. But levies from your own domain do actually cost you maintenance. So you don't want to keep them up all the time because it will actually cost you money. Now, levies raised from your vassals don't cost you any money. However, they do cost the vassals money. So the longer you have their levies raised, it's actually your vassals that are having to pay the maintenance. And for that reason, the longer you have your vassal levies raised, you'll actually start to get a negative penalty with the particular vassal. So for every vassal who is loaning you a levy, For every 61 days that that levy is raised, you will get a -1 opinion modifier with that particular ruler, with that particular vassal. And the longer the army is raised, the more that penalty stacks. Once you dismiss the levy, then the penalty starts to tick down at the same rate. So you'll lose -1 reputation modifier every 61 days until it resets back to 0. So there's very, very few ways where you can actually have a standing army, because a standing levy from your own domain is going to cost you maintenance money. A standing levy from your vassals is going to cost you negative opinion with your vassals. Mercenaries are just very, very expensive to maintain, and you should never keep mercenaries around. Really, you only need to hire them in the event of a sort of war where you need the extra troops and you need them fast. Retinues can be a good way to keep a standing army around, but again, they do cost you maintenance each month. So you will always have to pay maintenance for troops in some sort of fashion. Another very important thing to remember is if you have any levies raised, then you cannot declare war on somebody else. I don't think we actually have anybody that we can declare war on at the moment. Maybe we can declare war on these guys. But if you actually look at the list of requirements, it actually says that we cannot declare war if we have any raised army levies. So it doesn't matter if you've got retinues, it doesn't matter if you've got mercenaries, but you cannot raise your levies first, sit them on your opponent's border, declare war and dogpile in. You have to declare war first and raise your levies. And because each levy is raised in the county where it is stationed, it means if I want to go to war with this guy over here, and I go into my military screen and hit this button, which is raise all vassal levies, then my troops will basically appear spread all over the country, and it will take quite a bit of time to rally them and get them all up here. And as you can see, vassal levies start with minimal morale, which means they're very, very vulnerable. They're very, very likely to get squished very, very easily. If we go ahead and just dismiss all the vassal levies and just keep my own personal levies, you can see that levies from your own domain start with full morale, so they are always the strongest. One other little button that you'll see here, which I believe only usually, you can only use it if you're at war anyway, and I believe it only really makes any difference if you are a tribal leader, but you can basically, well, no, sorry, I'm getting confused. This one here actually allows us to call allies to war as well. If you're playing as one of the tribal leaders, you can actually call the tribes to war as well. So even if they're not directly your allies, if you're in a war, you can actually call your sort of tribal partners to come and help you out, so to speak. So that is a nice little thing to know there. But that's basically the way that armies work. It's how you raise and lower vassals. And in the next video, hopefully, we'll actually be able to unpause, go to war, and talk a little bit about how the battle system actually works. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you are finding these sort of tutorial videos useful, and hopefully they'll help at least 1 or 2 people get into the game, and then I'll feel like they've been worth doing, because I know that this game can be a little bit scary to get into, and if I've in any way managed to help a couple of people get to grips with it, then it's been a job well done. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next video. Until then, goodbye for now.